Greetings, Pathfinders, and welcome to Absalom Archives Current Events, Volume 1, Burnt Offerings. We are finally here. The first lore-important story in the Pathfinder universe, an iconic adventure that sets the stage for so many things going forward. We've got a lot to get through, so let me get all the preamble out of the way as quickly as I can, which is probably not very quickly because you should know that about me by now. This is our first AP video, so it's important to set the stage properly here. If you've never read a Pathfinder Adventure Path before, here's a quick breakdown of how they're laid out. Adventure Paths are released once per month as a 96-page softcover book. Each adventure path is 6 parts long, with each part covering a small range of levels. Playing through all 6 parts will give players a complete story adventure. As the game developed and eventually shifted to 2nd edition, this has changed a little bit, but for all of the 1st edition ones, this is how things worked. So we'll cover those changes when we get to them in like 10 years. It starts with a short 2-page foreword before the adventure begins. The adventure is 50 pages long and divided into parts, usually 3, but that can vary. After that, the last 40 pages are what we call back matter. These are supplemental pieces of information to the adventure itself. Usually there's an article about a notable location, for reference the one in Burnt Offerings was about Sandpoint, to give the GM some space to flesh things out. There's also an article about a second related topic. It can be anything from history to a branch of magic to a military organization. The one in Burnt Offerings is about Absalom as an example. After that, it's a little more fluid. Some will include a few pages of new items or player options, generally something appropriate for the adventure, and often something the players can directly earn in the adventure. Burnt Offerings doesn't have any of that, but later adventures do. There's also a bestiary, which includes a few new monster stat blocks. Like the player options, some might directly appear in the adventure, and some might just be thematically appropriate or simply cool. Lastly, there's the Pathfinder Journal, a small piece of short fiction. It doesn't usually tie directly to the adventure, instead being in a similar region or covering a similar theme. This feature was eventually phased out after about 100 volumes, which is a pretty good run to be sure. The format of these stories changes from time to time, the first 18 adventure paths being a series of journals by Pathfinder Society founder Eando Klein. After that, each AP's story is contained to that AP. So, what are we going to be covering here? The answer is the adventure. And just the adventure. Anything in the back matter that's relevant to the lore of the adventure path will either have a separate video or be integrated into a related video. You might have noticed that the 2 Burnt Offerings articles I referenced are things I've already made videos about. Almost like I planned it that way. The player stuff and bestiary stats are cool, and I might go over them at some point, but there's only so much you can get out of me reading a stat block. And for the Pathfinder Journal, well, those are also going to get their own videos after the AP is done. As for how I'll cover the adventure, well, that's a balancing act. I want to focus on the story, lore, and characters, and not get bogged down in mechanics, so you won't see raw numbers much or have me go over every fight. As an example, later in this video I'll be covering a location with a lot of different areas, but only a few of them actually matter. So it might look like I'm skipping a whole bunch of stuff, but I think it's more of prioritizing information. This is a story summary, not a walkthrough after all. If a room is only there to provide flavor, or maybe add a little red herring to the adventure, I'm not going to be covering it. Not every adventure is entirely linear. Sometimes events might be able to take place at whatever time the GM thinks they work best. In those cases, I'll do the same, putting them in where I think they fit. Similarly, sometimes players will have to make a decision about what to do. The adventure usually has an assumed outcome with guidance for possible variables. Since all the 1st edition adventures have canonical endings from when 2nd edition updated, I'll go with those where I can and use discretion on any edge cases. Remember, these are your adventures to experience for yourself. Canon is what you make of it, my version is just one possibility. On a related note, I'll also include a few personal opinions about the adventure from a GM or player perspective where I feel it's appropriate. Now for this adventure path, we have to talk about my sources. As I've covered before, Pathfinder 1st edition was based on D&D 3.5. The first 4 adventure paths were originally published using the 3.5 D&D rules, before the official Pathfinder rules were released. They were in beta at the time, essentially. This doesn't change a whole lot of things, but it does mean we have 2 separate sources for Rise of the Runelords. For this video, I'll be using the Anniversary Edition hardcover book primarily. 2 reasons why. First is that it's the book that I physically own. I only have PDFs of the original books, and it's just easier for me to take notes from a physical book. The second reason is that it's the most recent available source. If you wanted to read or run Rise of the Runelords, the Anniversary Edition is the easiest one to get. And in my opinion, it's the better book if you want to run it. Everything is nice and condensed. So I think that's everything. We're finally ready to get started with this adventure. If you haven't yet, I urge you to watch the primer video I put out before this. It goes over a lot of character backstory and setup that I will not be repeating here, so without it you might be a little confused, but I'll do my best to make sure you aren't completely lost without it. Also, I want to include a warning. This adventure contains mentions of animal harm and specifically the death of dogs. There are 2 separate instances of this, and I'll include timestamps on the screen right now, so you can skip these segments if you don't want to hear about that. Alrighty, it's time. Get your snacks and your drinks, get comfy in your chair or on your couch or like that big reclining Roman Emperor bed thingy. I don't judge how you sit or lay. Yet. No. Stay on topic. It's time to enter the town of Sandpoint for the Swallowtail Festival that kicks off the start of Burnt Offerings. Part 1. Festival and Fire. The start of Burnt Offerings is a good, easygoing way to begin an adventure. I actually think Attend a Town Festival is a great start to any campaign. It has so many possibilities for introducing characters to both each other and to the town. Sandpoint has really turned out for the event, the locals hosting a number of activities. Stuff like sack races, weightlifting, balance beams, tug-of-war contests, general picnic festival games. Each of Sandpoint's inns has also offered a free sampling of one of their signature dishes to entice people to come and eat there. The most popular around town is Amiko Kaijitsu's curry-spiced salmon, which serves as a good introduction to a character the PCs are going to have a lot more interaction with throughout this adventure. Though personally, I wouldn't mind trying the white deer's peppercorn venison or the hagfish's lobster chowder, for impartiality. At around noon, the local cleric Father Xantus conducts the Swallowtail release. Swallowtail butterflies are an animal considered sacred to the goddess Desna. There's an old myth of Desna falling to Galarian and being nursed back to health by a blind child. As thanks, Desna transformed the child into an immortal butterfly. Now, as a way to bless the new cathedral, the town has collected hundreds of these butterflies in a wagon, which Father Xantus releases to a round of cheers from the festival goers. All of these events lead up to the official consecration taking place around sundown. Father Xantus gets everyone's attention using an item called a thunderstone, which produces a loud noise when shattered on the ground. This is the signal for everyone to gather in the town square, as well as the signal the Goblin Raiders have been waiting for. Prior to the festival, Suto Kaijitsu blackmailed his father, Longiku, into doing a few innocent things. Unlocking Sandpoint's north gate, leaving a ladder by the wall of the local boneyard, and making sure the Kaijitsu glassworks were empty the night before the festival. These small actions let Suto smuggle some goblins into town and muster the rest of the raid just outside the north gate. Now, they attack, their war songs ringing through the streets of Sandpoint. Goblins chew and goblins bite, goblins cut and goblins fight, stab the dog and cut the horse, goblins eat and take by force, goblins race and goblins jump, goblins slash and goblins bump, burn the skin and mash the head, goblins hear and you be dead, chase the baby, catch the pup, bonk the head to shut it up, bones be cracked, flesh be stewed, we be goblins, you be food! Riveting stuff, huh? The goblins smash their way into town and cause immediate chaos. This raid is not well led, but it's a distraction. We'll cover what it's distracting from in a bit, because the raid is a more pressing concern. The goblins are happy to cause chaos and destruction, no matter the reason. This series of encounters is meant to set the PCs up as local heroes, so we're starting off light. None of the goblins are super notable or dangerous, but GMs are encouraged to play their antics up. Goblins doing silly stunts, attempting to start fires, and generally acting just kinda stupid. After the initial assault and surprise, PCs are drawn to goblin pyros who are attempting to light the bonfire fuel on fire in a blaze of glory. As a first encounter, things shouldn't be too hard, but if the PCs are in trouble, there are a few nearby NPCs to help them out. Father Xantus can provide a little spot healing with his cleric spells, while Sheriff Hemlock can serve as a distraction and meat shield with his fighter abilities. And the chaotic and goofy nature of the goblins gives a lot of chances for GMs to give their players a break by playing them a little bit less tactically. It can be important to remember as a GM that not every fight needs to be a nail-biting challenge. Letting the PCs feel cool and badass is just as important. The final set piece here takes place after the PCs have taken a moment to catch their breath. A cry can be heard down the street, and rushing to the location, PCs find a noble from nearby Magnamar named Aldrin Foxglove being attacked. His hunting hounds are attempting to defend him, but a goblin commando mounted on a goblin dog quickly kills the hound, rallying the rest of his squad to move in for the kill. It's here the PCs have a chance to intervene, saving Aldrin's life. He will definitely remember this moment, though that might have consequences. Defeating this last goblin functionally signals the end of the raid, the few goblins remaining alive scattering to the hills. Though the PCs are hailed as heroes, the mood in town is somber as the casualties start coming in. It's a delicate balance. The PCs should feel like heroes that made a difference, but also like the goblin raid did have an effect. The next few days are ones of recovery and moving on, with the cathedral being quietly consecrated the next day. Part 2. Local Heroes. The aftermath of the Goblin Raid sees the PCs showered with praise from the locals. Amiko Kaijitsu offers them free rooms at the Rusty Dragon for the week, giving a reason to stay around town. NPC shopkeepers offer discounts and gifts, while important members of the community approach them to participate at the local theater or have a drink at their tavern. This part takes place over a few days and can generally happen in any order, but there's a couple of things that kind of make sense if they come right after another. The first issue the PCs are approached with is also one that they need to be discreet about. Sheriff Hemlock and Father Xantus invite them to the Boneyard. Once the PCs arrive, they explain that the crypt of the previous head cleric, Father Tobin, has been broken into. Having heard noises from within, they want the PCs to investigate. While they think it's just a trapped goblin, the tomb actually has 2 skeletons waiting inside. Suto Kaijitsu used an item called a Robe of Bones to summon them as a trap for anyone investigating the scene. The rest of the raid was a distraction for him and a few goblins to sneak in here and steal Father Tobin's remains. Nualia Tobin plans to burn them in a sacrifice to Lamashtu. This burnt offering, will complete her demonic transformation. Not that the PCs can figure this out from what little they have here, all they know is that Father Tobin's body is gone and that someone left some skelly boys in return. On a lighter note, the party has 2 admirers in town who will cause some incidents in the following days. To talk about the first, we have to talk about the town's general store. Vem Vinder runs the store and has 2 daughters, Katrine and Shayless. Recently, Katrine has been spending her nights with Banny Harker, one of the 2 partners who runs the Sandpoint lumber mill. Vem has been incensed and obsessed with his daughter's actions and has left Shayless feeling unseen and neglected. So she's decided to cause an even bigger scandal. She seeks out the most attractive PC and sells them a story about needing someone big and strong to help take care of some rats in the store's basement. Just one person though, it's not that many rats. Once the PC accompanies her though, they find the basement is empty of rats, but Shayless does have a pair of sweater puppies to show them. She'll try to lead the PC to a cot in the corner for some solo adventuring, at which point her father walks down to retrieve something. You can probably guess how he reacts. Now what's cool about this scenario is that there's conflict and potential combat since Vem is pretty incensed, but it's not the usual D&D combat situation. There's no bad guy, and there are dozens of ways to resolve this conflict. The big thing to keep in mind is that however the PCs resolve the situation, they have to live with that. Sandpoint is a hub the PCs will be in for a while, and Vem Vinder is a well-known citizen. If they harm or even kill him, it could irreparably damage their reputation around town. Even if they just flee for their lives, Vem is likely to hold a grudge for what he thinks they were doing. This actually does have potential long-term implications, but for now the worst that happens is the PCs get a slight markup at the general store. The second admirer is the noble they rescued, Aldrin Foxglove. He's staying at the Rusty Dragon and has a lot of chances to get to know the PCs. He'll focus his attention on the most attractive female PC, but will turn that attention to whomever he feels is the most impressive if he lacks an obvious target. His attention is meant to come across as eager and well-meaning at first, but eventually turn into creepy. Before it reaches leave me alone forever levels though, Aldrin invites the PCs on a hunt in the nearby woods as a way to thank them. The hunt itself is nothing too crazy, just a wild boar, but interactions with Aldrin are key here because it sets the stage for some plots in Book 2. It also has the immediate effect of ensuring the PCs are at the Rusty Dragon enjoying dinner when the next event happens. While in Sandpoint, the players could stay at any inn they want, but the story assumes they take Amiko up on her offer of free lodging for the week and stay at the Rusty Dragon. If they aren't staying there, the boar hunt is a good way to get the players there for a night because Aldrin is staying there and will likely insist the PCs join him for a feast. It's important that the players be at the Rusty Dragon on at least one night because it's time to meet Amiko's father. Lonjiku Kaijitsu was blackmailed by his son Suto into helping with the goblin invasion. Lonjiku didn't know that's what he was doing, but in the days since he's put 2 and 2 together. Suto had proof of Lonjiku's connection to the local Skzarni gangs, who would use the glassworks' incredibly hot furnaces to dispose of, let's say, organic waste? Now Lonjiku wants to cut and run to Magnamar until this all blows over, but since Amiko is his only legitimate child, he wants her to come with him. Lonjiku doesn't have a lot of affection or respect for his daughter, and tries to force her to come with him. He also confronts the PCs for their heroics, spinning their actions to make things seem worse. Amiko refuses to go with him, and Lonjiku leaves the confrontation full of wounded pride and impotent anger. Establishing Amiko's connection to her family is the main point of this scene, since that will matter a lot in the next part. Now this next event, if I'm being honest, is a little gruesome. You might want to consider adjusting this one if you think players will react poorly to this situation. It starts off one evening when a woman named Emile Barrett comes running up to the PCs in tears. Every night since the raid, her son Aaron has been crying about a goblin in his closet whenever he goes to bed. Aaron's father Allergast has checked the closet and found nothing and was getting fed up with his son's antics. So tonight, he told the boy that no one would be coming into the room when he cried goblin. The thing is, there was a goblin in the closet. Greskert was a goblin commando who took part in the raid and fled once things started turning against the goblins. He broke into the house, found the closet, and clawed his way into a crawl space under the floorboards in the back, covering his escape with an old pile of furs and blankets. He intended to just hide and flee later, but he fell asleep and didn't wake up until night had long fallen and the Barrett family had returned home. When he tried to sneak out, the family dog Petal scared him back into hiding. He's been trying to sneak out at night, but the dog's barks and child's screams scare him back every time. But now he's gotten hungry and desperate enough to attack. Fashioning a knife from his broken dog slicer sword, Greskert emerged from his hiding place and killed Petal. Allerghast burst into the room and confronted the goblin, while Emil ran into the night for help. When the PCs enter the home, there's a grisly sight before them. Allerghast crawled into Greskert's hole to confront the goblin, which was a huge mistake. His throat was slit, and now Greskert is eating the dead man's face. The PCs can kill the goblin to avenge him, but Allerghast has already died, and his wounds are beyond the ability of the PCs to heal at this level. The Barretts go into shock from the tragedy and move in with Magnamar and relatives soon afterwards. This is dark and tragic. It can underscore the danger the goblin tribes pose to Sandpoint, reminding PCs that goblins may be goofy and weird, but they are also very dangerous. Remember that this was the first Pathfinder adventure, and the Pathfinder version of goblins were still a little new. They were written with a lot less nuance than they would be later, which colors things quite a bit. Still, for some groups, this can be a few steps too far. Pet death is something people get squeamish about, and the inability to actually save the family from this situation might rub some the wrong way. As an alternative, you can have the PCs arrive just as Allerghast is starting to die, giving them a chance to save him. The Barrett family isn't going to come up again unless you want to weave them back in, so any changes you make here won't damage the overall story. The last minor event before the next part is designed to introduce another important NPC for later books. Shalilu Andosana is an elven ranger who travels the forested lowlands of Varesia, scouting and keeping abreast of the various threats that lurk there. She stops into Sandpoint about twice a year to report in and get supplies. Her last visit was only a month ago, so her appearance now is unexpected. The reason she's here is because the local goblin tribes are acting strange. Normally they would fight each other as much as any non-goblins, but something is uniting them. Shalilu has information on the 5 tribes in the area, including their territory and leadership. She informs the PCs and town leadership that the goblins are gathering at Thistletop, and something big is coming. Shalilu is here to serve 2 purposes: to establish her character for a later book, and to point the PCs towards Thistletop when this book ends. Her information also gives GMs a good place to add extra side quests and adventures if they want. Just keep in mind the main points she's trying to hit, so you can avoid getting bogged down in exposition. Before the PCs can act on this and head off to Thistletop, there's one last event to take place: the kidnapping of Emiko Kaijitsu. One morning, a day or two after Longiku confronts the PCs at the Rusty Dragon, they are approached by Bethana Corwin, a halfling woman who works as a maid at the Rusty Dragon. She explains that Emiko wasn't there this morning to start breakfast, and when Bethana went to investigate, she found a crumpled note near Emiko's bed, written in Tian. The innkeeper has been teaching Bethana the language in her off time, so the halfling woman can translate it. Emiko's half-brother Suto has asked her to meet him at the Glassworks at midnight to discuss their father's possible involvement in the Goblin Raid. An ironic statement for obvious reasons, but Emiko didn't know that. She is yet to return, and Bethana is worried. Like I said, these plots can play out in any order. If you want to keep things moving and avoid the less necessary scenes, you can omit Shayless and the Barretts, but I highly recommend keeping the hunt with Aldrin and all the Kaijitsu scenes, since they lead in here. Shalilu is important, but if you want, her scene can come after this part as a bridge between what's happening now and the eventual raid on the Thistletop Goblins. Part 3. Glass and Wrath. The PCs will likely head to the Glassworks immediately after finding out about Emiko's disappearance. Their first immediate obstacle is the building is locked. All of the ground floor accessible windows have the curtains drawn, with no way to open them or part them from the outside. The chimney continues to emit smoke, so clearly the furnace is still working. While unusual, any locals questioned about the situation simply assume that Longiku is working on some kind of secret project, possibly for a noble in Magnamar. They suggest the PCs make the long trek to Kaijitsu Manor, but if they do, the servants there say they haven't seen Longiku since yesterday, and they assume he's down at the Glassworks working, so functionally they just get sent back where they came from. While simply picking the lock or forcing the door open is the most likely outcome for the PCs to pursue, they could also climb the building and look in the skylights. Doing so will give a very clear picture of what's actually happening in the Glassworks, but still make actually getting inside very tricky. The ceiling is high, and any characters climbing down a lowered rope will be easy targets for the Glassworks' current occupants. The ground entrances are located in these locations and are the most likely ways for the PCs to get inside. Most of the Glassworks is empty, eerily so since the place had a good number of live-in workers. Once they enter the main foundry, the PCs will find out why this place is so empty. Longiku and Suto never got along. Longiku considered Suto an embarrassment to be hidden and forgotten, while Suto resented being separated from his mother and sister, and suspected Longiku of killing his mother Atsui years ago. Which, to be fair, Suto is correct about. But confronting Longiku at the funeral probably wasn't the smartest idea, since all it got him was a broken jaw. But in a way, both men are very alike. Both have decided the other has outlived their usefulness. Suto sent Longiku a message attempting to extort him for quite a bit of gold. Longiku planned to kill Suto at this meeting, not realizing this blackmail attempt was just a trap. Suto struck first with his pack of goblins, knocking out the old man. He killed his father by strapping him to a chair and pouring molten glass over Longiku's body. Now the goblins in here are attempting to recreate Suto's masterpiece using the bodies of the slain workers. Goblins will attack the PCs as soon as they can, trying to make use of the current operating furnace if possible. The fires here are hot enough to burn even bones to ash. Longiku offered to let the local gangs dispose of bodies here just for that reason, so any PC that gets thrown in will need immediate attention. The goblins will fight recklessly, but once most of them drop, they run for Suto's help. Suto is currently sleeping in a lower level of the glassworks in a basement that once connected to smugglers' tunnels. Longiku's father Rokuro discovered some employees using it to smuggle goods and had it bricked up, but Longiku reopened it. Suto used the tunnels to bring in goblins for the raid and hopes to use them more in the coming days. When roused, Suto will fight the PCs as best he can, only running if nearly killed or if all the goblins fall. If captured, he only talks if magically forced, otherwise remaining loyal and silent. His journal, which can be found down here, gives a much better picture of what's going on. In it, he writes about meeting Nualia Tobin again and agreeing to help her with destroying the town. Suto is largely motivated by lust and is mildly concerned about what Lamashtu's demonic transformation might turn Nualia into. The journal also contains his fanfic drawings of her as a succubus with full frontal, so that's lovely. Amiko can be found in the adjoining room, beaten unconscious. Suto wanted to bring her in on the plan, but she didn't bite, so he let the goblins rough her up. His plan was to sneak back out to Thistletop with her later that night, but that's all gone up in smoke. Amiko doesn't know about her father's fate, and when informed or discovering it, takes it stoically. She leaves the glassworks as soon as she can to return home and rest from the ordeal. Now those smugglers' tunnels, they present an interesting little area. Remember that rune well of wrath that caused a lot of the town's problems? Well, it's located down here, along with a few interesting inhabitants. This dungeon can seem pretty optional since it only ties into the previous stuff by its physical connection to the glassworks, but like a lot of other elements in this, it's setting up something important for later. This area is part of a larger, currently inaccessible complex that will become important in Book 5. The first creature they will encounter is a Sin Spawn, a horrible flesh monster originally created by Runelord Elasnist in Thassalon's time. Her rune wells could create them under the right circumstances, and that's just what the creature that rules these ruins has been doing, slowly building up their own army. These Sin Spawn are all created using a rune well of wrath and are, as a result, easily provoked and difficult to negotiate with. However, if a PC does seem particularly wrathful, this could be a good place to accentuate that. A player's connection to the deadly sins is going to be very important in Book 5, and tracking that early can be quite helpful. The old ruins are highly preserved thanks to Thessalonian magic, painting a picture of the torturous prison this place used to be. From the time of Thassalon's fall until Sandpoint's founding, the catacombs were the kingdom of an insane demon named Erlium. A type of demon called a Quasit, Erlium once served the master of this complex, Zaliasa. Zaliasa was complicated. Not in the personality sense, but in the I need a lot of words to explain this sense. So, big inhale here. Zaliasa was a prison warden and experimenter who worked for Runelord Elasnist at this facility where he tortured people for fun and profit, except he was also a secret assassin under the pay of Karzug, a double agent waiting for his time to activate and strike. But because of the stress of that, he was also an insane wreck who pledged himself to Lamashtu for power and possibly because he had a double-cross fetish? The conflict in him manifested as insane writings, which gave him the nickname the Scribbler. He died when the catacombs collapsed in Earthfall, but, well, let's just say sometimes foreshadowing is subtle and sometimes it isn't. But after he died, Erlium was trapped alone for thousands of years in the catacombs, with only a few well-preserved zombies for company. It drove her a little mad. She viewed those few rooms as a kingdom over which she ruled. When smugglers broke through the walls and opened her up to the world, Erlium kinda freaked out and killed them. She realized her mistake when the rest of those smugglers resealed the catacombs. It snapped her out of her reverie, and she has spent the 4 decades since then communing with her divine patron, preparing for something on the horizon. When the runewell lit up 5 years ago, she gained a vision of a woman with white hair who would be the one to truly set Erlium free. When Nualia arrived soon after, she found a willing servant of Lamashtu ready to guide her. While Nualia has long moved on, Erlium has remained in these catacombs, partly to watch them, but mostly because she's grown a bit agoraphobic over the centuries and is less eager to leave than you might think. For now, she guards the runewell deep in the complex, making Sin Spawn to supplement the goblin raids the town will soon suffer. Speaking of goblins, there's one that's wandered down here. Corvus was a hero of the Seven Toes tribe. When he discovered the smuggler's tunnel entrance, he bravely went in and drank the corrupted waters in the shrine of Lamashtu, located here. The demonic energy transformed Corvus into a twisted new form, giving him a third arm and the ability to vomit acidic blood. He guards Airliam's pack of zombies, his fawning admiration for her as Lamashtu's champion having grown annoying for the Quasit. The PCs exploring will eventually confront Airliam at the Rune Well, where she shows off its power by producing a sin spawn using her blood. It also serves to show the Rune Well's weakness, with it clearly losing a chunk of power when the creature is created. It gives the PCs a clue for how to get rid of the dangerous artifacts threat to the town above. Deactivating the Rune Well serves as a good climax for this dungeon. It also gives a false sense of closure, making the PCs think that there's nothing left to do down here, which Book 5 will emphatically prove wrong. But with that ticking time bomb done, it's time for the heroes to set out into the wilds, towards Thistletop, where the goblins' leader Nualia resides. No more being reactive, it's time to take the fight to the enemies in... Part 4, Thistletop. Thistletop is a huge dungeon section with multiple levels. In fact, the start of this part is concerned with just getting there. Something that's important to remember for players and new GMs is that you don't have to tackle these places all at once. Retreating and regrouping is always an option. Thistletop is just up the coast from Sandpoint, only about an hour's travel away, which makes it much easier for lower level characters to retreat and restock as needed. The Thistletop itself is an oddity, an island off the coast with a strange shape, one that almost resembles a face. That's because it used to be the head of a statue of Karzug, stationed on the border of Shalast. Earthfall toppled the statue, and the rest of it has been buried in the surrounding lands over time, but landing in the water spared the head, whose Thassalonian enchantments have significantly slowed the effects of erosion, preserving the location. On certain days when the light hits right, you can even make out the features the statue used to have. This is also why there's a large complex of rooms inside Thistletop. The Guardian statue functioned as a base to monitor the border and interrogate prisoners captured from Bakra Khan, and that fact is why something terrible has been imprisoned below for thousands of years. Just before Earthfall, a minion of Elasnus named Malfeshnakor was captured and brought here for interrogation. Malfeshnakor is a Barghest, a demonic wolf creature capable of taking on a goblin form. When the head tumbled into the surf, he was one of the only things to survive, trapped in the lower levels of Thistletop. Centuries passed with him attempting to gain freedom. A while back, a cult of Lamashtu managed to commune with him and tried to free the Barghast, but were killed in the attempt. The creature that killed them has long since fled, but Malfeshnakor hasn't been able to connect with the goblins that moved in afterwards in quite the same way. They know something is down there, but not how to release him. Nualia's arrival changed that, and she has been slowly opening up the lower levels of Thistletop. As a creature deeply tied to Lamashtu, Malfeshnakor has been instructing Nualia in the rites she needs to perform in order to complete her demonic transformation. But before we can tackle Thistletop, we have to get there, and that's going to be harder than you might think. The area surrounding Thistletop is heavily overgrown with briars and thistles, which form a dense natural maze for anyone larger than a goblin. The Thistletop tribe has also constructed mats of various thistles that can be moved, allowing the tunnels here to be blocked off or opened up. PCs can find and move these to enter the tunnels, though again, anyone larger than a goblin needs to crouch and squeeze to move around. While doing this, PCs who look around can see evidence of goblins, small animals, and strangely, large drag marks of something heavy being moved. Some goblins and goblin dogs are wandering around the area, but the biggest threat is the druid Gogmert and his firepelt cougar Tangletooth. Once the main advisor to Chief Ripnugget, Gogmert is worried that the chief is too infatuated with Nualia and is brooding in nature with his pet. Still loyal to the tribe, he will fight until almost dead or clearly outmatched, in which case he will flee or beg for mercy. Gogmert won't intentionally give up info about the tribe, but will talk about Nualia and her associates if pressed. He's not the brightest and hasn't slept in a while, so he'll ramble and may reveal something he doesn't mean to. If the group tries to take him along, he will sniffle, cry, and wail the entire time, giving away positions and annoying the hell out of them. Once the party reaches the bridge, they'll need to cross. The bridge itself is trapped, and when a certain amount of weight is placed on it, one side releases and dumps everyone into the water. If the party does fall, they may attract the attention of the creature that lives in the lower sea cave, a bunyip. Think a carnivorous murder seal. It lairs in a cave below the nettles and is often fed scraps by goblins from a hole in its grotto above. So it's a little lazy, but it will attack any prey it senses, and the PCs seem a lot like prey. Once the characters get across, they'll find a group of goblins playing a ridiculous and cruel game called Kill Gull. A seagull is tied to about 30 feet of rope and given to a goblin, who yanks it around while the other three try and throw rocks at it. If a goblin hits and kills the gull, they win. If all three goblins run out of rocks, the string holder wins. Winner gets to eat the seagull. The point here is to both show the cruel game these goblins play when left alone, and reward stealthy groups with an easily distracted ambush situation. The first main level of Thistletop is where most of the goblins live and are moving around. 6 of them are sleeping in the barracks, while 12 more mill about the area. 2 important places here are the shed and the throne room. The shed contains a combination prize and horrible mistake. Several days ago, the goblins assaulted a traveling merchant and stole one of his horses. Most goblins despise horses and consider killing them a great honor, so they will often capture them and bring them to Thistletop for the chief to battle. Most of the time, they get simple riding mounts that are well, not easy, but a fight the goblins can handle. Unfortunately, this time they got a trained warhorse named Shadow Mist. It's honestly a stroke of luck they captured the horse at all, considering it killed 4 goblins before going down, and dragging it all the way back here took a lot of work. Their mistake was feeding the horse a healing potion so they could fight it. Shadow Mist immediately proved to be nearly unstoppable, breaking Chief Ripnugget's arm when he tried to subdue it. After a lot of antics and pain, the goblins managed to get the horse secured in the shed, where they have nailed it inside. Shadow Mist is a strong and majestic creature, but also malnourished after not eating for several days. PCs can free him and try to calm him down, or even secure his aid as a mount or animal companion. The cramped halls of Thistletop aren't the best suited for horses, but for this first area, the fear factor from the goblins can be very effective. The merchant he was taken from fled to Sandpoint and is willing to reward the PCs if they return the horse. The throne room is where Chief Ripnugget resides, along with his gecko mount Sticky Feet and a few elite goblins. Ripnugget is actually a lot more clever than he lets on. Most of the tribe think he's just stupidly infatuated with Nualia and has turned into a simpering mess. In fact, he's nothing of the sort. When Nualia showed up with human mercenaries and a bugbear in tow, he correctly figured that the goblins would all die fighting them. Seeing Nualia open up deeper levels of the catacombs and vaguely aware of Malfeshnakor, Ripnugget figures Nualia is the key to releasing the Barghest and expanding the goblins' territory inside Thistletop. Now technically the PCs can access the lower floors without fighting Ripnugget, but doing so is probably a bad idea. He is chief for a reason, and his gecko mount gives him a lot of unexpected maneuverability. Any close fight could turn against the PCs if they leave him behind to plot an ambush. The second level of Thistletop is now mostly home to Nualia's minions. There are 2 access points located here, and they come out on the next levels here and here. The first entrance is the most likely one the PCs will find, so we'll start from there. The first room is an abandoned feast hall, once used by the goblins before Nualia took the furniture from here. Branching off, there are 2 rooms that require a delicate approach. The first is a nursery. The Thistletop tribe has a bad habit of raising children poorly, as can be seen by the cages in this room. Thankfully, they are empty. The "but what about the goblin babies" question is as old as this hobby itself and honestly very tiring to debate. Unless your group actively wants that, keep the cages empty. The other room is Ripnugget's harem. He has 4 wives who he's been ignoring lately to keep up the act for Nualia. As a result, they've decided to entertain themselves with Nualia's bugbear bodyguard, Bruthasmus. Bruthasmus has stalked the Lost Coast for years, killing anyone he pleases, but especially targeting elves to take their ears as trophies. He's clashed with Shalilu several times, in fact. When he encountered Nualia, he tried to kill her too. She kicked his ass easily and offered him a job as her bodyguard. Figuring, well, better than nothing, he agreed and has worked for her since. And since moving to Thistletop, he spent most of his time here being entertained by the harem. Now this room has the potential to be gross and or creepy for players, so GMs should be careful not to have the players stumble into something just for the purpose of shock value. The adventure takes the time to describe how gross smelling the room is from goblin perfume, which you can also use or not as you want. Down the hallway we have the quarters used by Nualia's minions. Bruthasmus is in his room here if he's not with the harem, and Suto's room is also here. If he escaped from the party, he can be found sleeping and sulking here about half the time. Another room belongs to a character who can only be found here if she's sleeping, so we'll cover her in the room she's more likely to be found in. The only room likely to be occupied when the PCs roll through is this one, featuring down on his luck mercenary Oric Van Kaskerkin. Oric has his own complicated history from the city of Riddleport, where he was tricked by a shady alchemist, a Nephilim prostitute, and some illicit potions. He fled Riddleport to Magnamar, where he met Nualia and agreed to be one of her bodyguards. He's gotten a little conflicted about what Nualia is doing, but not enough to stop just yet. He's also infatuated with another of Nualia's minions, who herself is infatuated with Suto, who is Nualia's lover, and when did this become a soap opera? Oric will fight the PCs, but surrender if clearly outmatched. His loyalty is pretty loose, and if strong-armed, he'll help the PCs, but he hasn't explored much and doesn't have good intel on the lower levels. On the right side of the complex, the more natural-looking cavern is stalked by a creature called a Tentamort. It's a mindless predator that the goblins don't control so much as avoid, so I just bring it up for the sake of completion. The largest room here is the chapel to Lamashtu, where Nualia performs ceremonies on a weekly basis for the goblins. Her demonic patron has generously given her 3 powerful creatures called Yethhounds. These emaciated-looking extraplanar dogs can fly, incite panic with their barks, and induce fear with their sinister bites. One always accompanies Nualia, while the other 2 lurk in the upper shadows of this chapel, guarding it from intruders. The altar here contains ash and bits of bone, all that remains of Father Tobin, whose remains Nualia ritualistically sacrificed to Lamashtu after the first raid. Now, if the PCs time their attack on Thistletop for when Nualia is having one of her services here, they can encounter every NPC except Oric. He attended the first, but excused himself from the rest due to guard duty because he was kinda freaked out. This would make for an incredibly hard fight for the PCs, but if they want to go hard, it might be fun to try. Just keep in mind this means running Nualia, Ruthasmus, a dozen goblins including Ripnugget, a wizard who I promise we're getting to, and potentially Suto if he lived. For context, the PCs should be around level 3 right now, and I'd rate the full cathedral as a CR7 fight at least. The last area we'll cover is the first area the PCs will see if they take the other stairs down from the ground level. Here they'll find the war room with all of Nualia's plans for Sandpoint. Once she frees Malfeshnakor, she plans to gather more goblins from the region and mount a second raid, supported by Sinspawn from the Catacombs of Wrath. If the PCs skipped that area, this might incentivize them to go back and clean that up. The next room over is a research room where PCs are likely to encounter Nualia's last human minion, Lyri. Lyri is a failed applicant to the Pathfinder Society, likely rejected for killing 2 of her competing applicants. As far as she's concerned, that should be considered an application booster, but the Pathfinders saw things differently. Now she works for Nualia, studying Thessalonian artifacts they uncover deeper in Thistletop. She has a weird obsession with Suto that PCs might be able to exploit. As a wizard, she's relatively squishy compared to Bruthasmus or Auric, but her spells can do a lot more damage to a greater range of people. This room contains what would have been a secret door, but heavy use has exposed it, and if the PCs haven't raised an alarm, it's just standing open. This leads down to the final level of Thistletop, where Nualia awaits. The first few rooms are empty, with only a trap in the hallway to menace the PCs. Turning right leads down a hallway that offers some clues to the Thessalonians who built this place, and some treasure, but little else. Turning left heads to the old observation room, where Nualia awaits. Nualia has changed since she left Sandpoint. She has self-inflicted scars across her abdomen and a demonic right hand, gained after she burned her adopted father's remains. Here she keeps her notes, journals, and personal plans, as well as research into how to free the Barghest. One of the Yeth Hounds remains with her here, as well as any allies that have fled to warn her. While Nualia is a cleric, she has limited healing, instead using her spells to buff herself. Her training makes her a dangerous and powerful combatant who can hit surprisingly hard to unprepared PCs, especially if they've already been panicked by the Yeth Hound. Nualia won't surrender, but she will try to escape if she thinks she's losing. A Nualia that flees could make a great recurring antagonist, getting more and more demonic enhancements from Lamashtu as she seeks revenge. Or, if the PCs somehow get her side of the story, you could do a very compelling redemption for her as she gets closure and moves past what Sandpoint did to her. Once Nualia is defeated, you can technically call the adventure over. No one here has worked out how to free Malfeshnakor, and his best chances have been slaughtered. But he's still a dangerous creature to leave behind, and most PCs will want to finish the job. In the hallway here is a large pillar of stone, magically enchanted to look like a pile of gold. Small, hard-to-spot coin slots are located here. If gold is inserted into them, the pillar retracts into the ground, revealing the rest of the complex. The room to the left was for communication and contains an echo of Karzuk's last message to this place. It can serve as a great bit of foreshadowing, but doesn't have any relevant information. The room across the hall is an old surgical room, containing dusty bones of the last person worked on here 10,000 years ago, only holding their shape due to inertia. The surgical tools here are worth something, but the biggest prize is the 7-pointed star key that unlocks the final room. Malfeshnakor has been bound to this room since his capture and has slowly gone mad. Though he doesn't need to eat, he has a supernatural hunger that hasn't been sated in centuries. The doorway in is locked by magic, only opening to the proper key or a spellcaster more powerful than anyone who's yet shown up here. As a greater Barghest, he's an incredibly dangerous foe, capable of devastating spells and powerful bites with his jaws. His bag of tricks can easily overwhelm PCs, but there is one advantage they have over him. Unlocking the door does not remove his binding. He cannot leave the room by any means, which gives ranged PCs a great place to stay back in cover and fire at him. It even gives them a great chance to retreat and regroup if he starts winning a fight. With the Barghest defeated, the PCs have truly saved Sandpoint from destruction. For now. Burnt Offerings is in many ways designed to feel like a complete adventure. The greater plot is only in hints and whispers, very disconnected from what's going on to happen in the future. The PCs should feel like they can return to their current home to rest up and bask in the glory of having saved the town and taken out a few local menaces along the way. Sandpoint should feel like it's starting to settle back down from all the excitement and get back to being that sleepy little coastal town it sees itself as. But Sandpoint's troubles are far from over, and things are going to get worse before they get better when we return next time in The Skinsaw Murders. Thank you so much for watching, Pathfinders. What did you think of this first part? Is there anything you want me to cover more in depth? How did you like the format? Did you have a favorite character or situation? Personally, Nualia is my favorite character from this part. Her backstory is so tragic and heartbreaking, but without making excuses for her. She deserved better than what she got as a child, that's for damn sure. You know, I wonder if we'll ever circle back to that. But for now, it's time to sign off. Please make sure to do all the YouTube things and check out the Patreon linked below. Thank you so much for watching, Pathfinders, and until next time, explore, report, and cooperate.